Everybody, this is your 6-year-old carnivore friend George from Bridgewater in Somerset in England, and it's Saturday night here, and I'm just checking in really to give you an update on what's going on. So it's been a fairly momentous week for me this week because I've managed to achieve a couple of things. The first thing is that I've renamed my channel Good Enough for You and relaunched it. I've now actually learnt how to use StreamYard and also upload videos from StreamYard to YouTube. Those of you who know me well will know that I'm a complete techno idiot. So I find anything to do with computers and sequences of buttons very frightening. I have a history of this. At school, I was not even allowed to do mathematics because I was that stupid. Any simultaneous equations, which are really basic, I just could not do them at all. They were just a jumble of meaningless letters and numbers to me. So I was only allowed to take arithmetic at GCE O level. And I also wasn't allowed to take either physics or chemistry because I was just an intellectual disaster area in those two particular things. Bizarrely, when it comes to languages, history, geography, English, food and nutrition, actually, cookery, and also biology, anything to do with flesh and blood, I was pretty much a straight A student. So there is a significant chunk of my brain which is completely scrambled. So I can only think it is some sort of technical dyslexia, which makes things life a bit difficult. However, I do have some great friends out there who are a lot better than me. One of whom is my great carnival friend Stephanie Taylor, and Stephanie, bless her, put together an 8-minute idiot's guide to how to upload a video from StreamYard to YouTube. She was very, very patient. She completely lost me at the words files and folders, but we managed to get around that, and I was able to upload my first ever interview, which I did on StreamYard, to YouTube on Wednesday. So those of you who know my channel, well, I imagine most of you do, would have seen me interview the great Dr. Kilt, and it was actually quite successful. So that was a very huge victory in the game of life. And then yesterday, having completed the Kilts coaching course, ketogenic and carnivore coaching certificate, I actually got the certificate. So I'm now a certificated nutritional coach from New York and America, basically. I don't think it probably carries any weight over here, but I do have a little bit of something I can show for my 3.5 years of study that I have been doing in managing to heal myself and return to health. And I'm now in a position to help other people because we did learn a lot on that course, a lot more even than what I'd learned through my own studies. So huge gratitude to the Kills Health team. And also, knocking on from that, I am will be attending this year a Somerset Armed Forces Veterans Health Conference on November the 4th. And as most of you know, I am an ex-soldier and a veteran, and these sort of things are very, very important to me. I take a lot of interest in veterans' health. And I actually went to this last year because the project manager for the Somerset Armed Forces partnership is somebody I met in June last year. She was a nurse. She is now obviously a manager within the National Health Service, and she runs it. I met her, told my story of how I'd lost 9 stone, which is 120 pounds, and how I'd totally cured type 2 diabetes. She was very, very impressed, and basically wanted me to come along to this veterans conference as an example of what can be done with a bit of a backup maybe from the National Health Service, because it was a nurse who from the National Health Service who put me on the right track. So I went last year, and I went as a patient of the National Health Service under the East Key Medical Centre. This year I will be going as a representative of Kilts Health in New York because I'm now trained in nutritional coaching. So that is a big step forward as well. I will be amongst fellow professionals, basically, even though I'm not yet using it, but I am a qualified nutritional health coach, so which is a big step forward in my life. For those of you who remember me from the army, those of you who remember me from my days of 3 Squadron in 9th Single Regiment in Cyprus, you will remember that we had in 1 Squadron the Royal Pioneer Corps, and last year at this conference I met up with a guy called Mark Corey, He was a pad, a married person who lived down at Pergamos, so we didn't see too much of him on site, but we did remember quite a few of of the people we knew, shall we say, the likes of Dave Kerr, I think might be following this, Scouse Quantrang, Adi Palmer, various other great other Royal Pioneer call lads, Chaddy, Steve Chadwick. Yeah, so it was nice to catch up with at least one person there who I knew, which is really good. And I'm really looking forward to going back on November the 4th this year, as I said, as a representative of Kilts Health this time. So it is a big step forward in my life. So yeah, we're talking about veterans health and veterans things in general. This video is going to be more about the army than it will be about my carnivore lifestyle, because sadly, very recently, my best friend from basic training, Icky Kenyon, died, and it's his funeral on Monday in Bolton. It's at Overdale Crematorium at 11 o'clock on Monday morning. Overdale Crematorium is in Bolton, and I understand that there will be a gathering at the Beehive afterwards. So my thoughts will be with you. I won't be able to go. It's just too far for me and logistically a nightmare. I know that some of my friends and Icky's friends, our mutual friends, will be attending. Big shout out to Wendy, who I know is definitely going. Tim McCardle, who is holding everything together, and I know that Al Smith is going to be there as well. So hi to them and to anybody else who's going who remembers me. So yeah, I'm very sad not to be there, but I'm hoping I'm going to put together a little tribute to Icky now. But firstly, let's remember his wife Diane, who loved him very much. I'm a friend of hers on Facebook. And I was lucky enough to meet his family. I believe his mum Maureen is still alive, and I know for a fact that his sister Fiona is still alive. So our thoughts are with them. So yeah, me and Icky go back a long time. May 1985, in fact, when I first met him. I first met him at 11 Signal Regiment, Heller's Barracks at Catterick Garrison, when I flunked out on the parachute regiment, having got a disease called cellulitis. And when they discovered that I had a half a brain, because I do speak French, they sent me off to be a linguist in the Royal Corps Signals. So I turned up at one troop, 11 SIGs, and one of the first people I met was Icky, because he came to introduce himself, because he was that sort of person, always nosy, always needed to know what was going on. And the first part of him that arrived in the room where I was standing was his grin. Big broad Scouse grin, and with a Scouse accent attached to it. Not a true Scouser, a woolly back, yeah, because he actually comes from Ormskirk. But yeah, close enough, shall we say. And that was when I first became friends with Icky. And yeah, we started to have some great times. Both of us had a liking for beer and pubs and that sort of thing. We used to go down the Swale Arms quite a lot, and we'd often head off into such places as Richmond for a beer. Then he moved on to Loughborough, where I followed in October of that year of 1985, and he was the first person again to greet me there. And just about the first thing he did is, get your kits stashed away, George. We're going down the town. So we went down to the town. And those of you who remember those days back in Loughborough in 1985 will remember that HQ was the Casablanca pub, and the little balcony we used to sit on, where he took me straight up there. And I remember that he insisted on drinking Grolsch out of the bottle. You remember the bottles with a picture of the gorilla on it, with the sort of flip top with the red plastic washer on it. They were £1 a bottle back in those days. I remember it well because Icky borrowed 10 quid off me that night so he could drink 10 bottles of Grolsch. So there we go. That was how I caught up with Icky back in Loughborough. Yeah, and then in 1986, the following year, we'd become very good friends, and I'm a great fan of horse racing, as you know. And Icky lives in Ormskirk, which is not far from Aintree and the Grand National. So on the evening of the Grand National, we travelled from Loughborough Railway Station, and we went to stay at his house, which I still remember the address of. It's 13 Claremont Avenue, Ormskirk. So we took the train from Loughborough to Liverpool, and of course the trains back in those days, probably still are, were a mobile bar. So by the time we got to Liverpool, we were well and truly on our way, so to speak. I do remember going past Utux to the racecourse, And I do remember that Icky insisted on going for a drink in the Central Pub or something like that, anyway, in Liverpool. And as we were going in, he had a minor altercation with some street urchins, which we thought nothing of. And then we had a couple of pints in there. We were going to leave, and we suddenly realised that a couple of street urchins that he'd exchanged words with had become quite a sizable gang of 6 or 7. So, and they were waiting for us basically. We asked the landlord, "Was there a back exit?" No, there wasn't. So, what are we going to do now then? At that time, at that moment, 3 very large lads stood up and said, "Are you lads? Are you lads army?" Yeah, we are. And they said, "We're Kingsdiv. Don't worry about it. We'll walk out with you." So 3 excellent infantrymen from the King's Division, or King's Regiment, possibly, I can't remember, whether they walked out with us, and this crowd of wannabe tough guys basically melted into the background. We successfully got to the end of the road, legged it, scarpered back to the railway station, and got the train to Ormskirk, the local train to Ormskirk, where there was another little bit of a altercation, shall we say, because one of the passengers said, "Oh, you lads army?" And we said, "Yes." He said, "Oh, I'm an ex-marine myself." And I said, "But my brother is also an ex-marine. Well, he was in 4-1 Commando back in the day." And I said, "Oh, what commando were you?" He said, "Oh, I don't remember that." Those of you who know what I'm talking about will know that that is a true giveaway sign that this guy was a Walter Mitty. Icky had words with him, and anyway, I managed to actually stop the fight from happening, and we got off at Ormskirk and went and got some fish and chips. We went to his dad's social club where we met his dad, by which time I was probably seeing, no, I was seeing double, I'll be honest, because me and Icky played pool, and was it snooker? It might be snooker, because there was a pink ball on the table, and I clearly remember trying to line the pink ball up with the white ball, and there were 2 of the wretched things, 2 pink balls. So I kind of straightened my eyes out. It came together into one, but then the 2 balls went off in the opposite directions. So yeah, I think I can safely say I was seeing double. At which point I decided that, come on, Icky, we've better get back to yours. So we got back to number 13 Claremont Avenue, and there was lots of Mum's going to be asleep, and the sister as well. So he said, "Right, we got to take our shoes off before we go in." So anyway, so I I bent down to take my shoes off, and of course, being a slightly wobbly, my shoulder fell against the front door, which wasn't open at the time; it was still locked. And Icky had his key ready to go, at which point the door opened and I fell in, flat on my back, staring up into the smiling face of Mrs. Kenyon, Icky's mum, with a laughing Fiona, his sister, standing directly behind her. And they were apparently been listening at the door for 10 minutes, laughing their female parts off, at the sort of chaos that myself and Icky were keeping up and trying to keep quiet. So I think I slept on the floor that night. Can't really remember. Yeah, I did. I'm sure I did. And next day, it was Grand National Day, and Ormskirk is a couple of miles up the road from Aintree. So Fiona very kindly gave us a lift into to the race. We brought our way into the grandstand, and yeah, we had a good day. Again, the drinking continued on course. 1 or 2 other people were probably about as drunk as we were. But I remember it was the year of West Tip and Richard Dunwoody, 1986. And I've really fancied a horse called Drumlargen. And we watched the race. And the halfway point of the race, as some of you will know, there is a fence called the Chair in front of the stand. And after they all cleared the chair, we noticed there was 1 horse sat in the chair. Very apt. He was actually sat in the chair. And I noticed from the number cloth that this said horse was, in fact, our horse, Drumlargen. Icky was all for going down, pulling the jockey out of the ditch, and basically dragging the chair out the fence instead of the jockey to remount. But I did point out that A, that was not exactly part of the rules, and B, by the time we got down there and remounted him, then the race would have been over anyway. So we let it go. Can't remember the rest of the day really at the races, but I remember that we did arrange to phone Fiona to come and collect us after racing. But of course, back in those days, there were no mobile phones, so we had to go and find the phone box. We couldn't find the phone box, but we did find a branch of the Royal British Legion in Aintree. So we went in and asked if they had a payphone, which they did. As we were about to use it, so I suddenly thought, hang on a second, Icky, we're card carrying Mod Form 90 soldiers. We can get a drink here. So we asked the kind gentleman at the door, could we get a drink? Oh, of course, can, lads, because you're soldiers. So in we went. Yeah, okay, there's probably about an hour and a half in there, maybe. Can't remember it all, but I do remember there was a piano, there was singing, and there was certain types of dancing, which is basically waltzing. With some of myself and Nicky chose our partners, or our partners chose us. A couple of some of the fine ladies who were probably sort of World War II veterans, I would imagine. And yeah, we were spun around the dance floor a few times to the tunes of things like Bye Bye Blackbird and Chattanooga Choo Choo from the Glenn Miller arrangement, and maybe a bit of Viridin as well, maybe the White Cliffs of Dover, quite probably. But I remember we did eventually have to go, and I recall us going out on our hands and knees to a rendition of a Good Night Ladies, We're Sad to See You Go from the gathered veterans that were there. So that was very memorable. Yeah, Fiona must have picked us up because we got safely back to Icky's house. And then we went out again into Ormskirk, where I got vague recollections of being warned by a bouncer that we got to behave ourselves, but no police were called, and we got back safely to his place that night and got the train back to Loughborough the next day, and we made parade on Monday morning, so no harm done. But what a great weekend, and what a memorable weekend that I spent at Icky's mum's house. Yeah, so moving on to a bit of another story from 1986. It was in the summer. It was, I think, it must have been June because it was very late evenings, very early mornings, and we were out on the toot in Loughborough. And once again, there was a minor altercation in the street, which I managed to talk Icky out of. But he was quite angry, so he took a swipe with his shoe at the nearest sort of traffic island, one of those big plastic white things with the directional arrows on them. He had no intention of destroying it, but it didn't know his own strength and his anger, and it came up by the roots and ended up lying in the road. At which point, there was a police car at a very inconvenient time in a very inconvenient place, and of course, Icky ended up in the back of it and went to Loughborough Police Station. I said to the arresting officer, I said, how long do you reckon before you can process him? He said, oh, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. So I went and got for an Indian restaurant. There was one other lad with me as well. And we went to the police station, and we got a fairly warm welcome. And the arresting officer said, oh, don't worry, it won't be very long now. We'll get it sorted. So I sat down to wait. About an hour later, the arresting officer came out with looking slightly frazzled, slightly stressed. He said, there's a bit of a problem, lads. He said, Michael is not, as Icky's name is not actually cooperating. Every time I ask him to give me his address, he tells me Button Moon. Yeah, okay. So the things went on for about an hour until eventually I think Icky probably did give up his address, which would have been the camp at Woodhouse Eaves at that time. And we were able to get away, and it was actually light by that time, so I think it was probably June. We got back to camp about 5 o'clock. The police handed the matter over to the military authorities, and Icky got a week of restriction of privileges. So yeah, lessons learned. No real harm done, but that was typical Icky. Basically, we had so many times like that. In December of 1986, Icky preceded me over to Cyprus, and I followed him in October of 1987, where once again we hooked up. And I remember one particular night on the toot in Larnaca. If anybody remembers, what was the name of that pub? No, I can't remember it now. The one on the seafront, but which we always used to go to at one time, and then it came out of favour. There was a barmaid called Sandy, and next time I saw her, she said, "Oh, you're looking a bit better this time because the last time I saw you, you were well oiled," is the actual phrase that she used. So yeah, great times. And myself and Nicky went on to have some fabulous times in Cyprus. I remember one day in the village of Platyrus up in the Troodos Mountains. We started very early, had a great lunch, went down the Marquee pub, which got a fantastic balcony. And I remember getting woken up by the landlord because we were sleeping on the deck chairs out there to tell us it was probably time to go home. So yeah, happy memories of me and Nicky in Cyprus. So yeah, those are the truly happy memories. I left the army in '93. I never actually saw Ricky again. We did hook up on the phone about 10 years ago. I had just gone through some serious mental health problems myself. I lost a year of my life, a year of my working life to stress and depression. Icky, I think, was either homeless at the time or had married Diane, but had very fragile mental health. So we didn't really sort of try to arrange anything because neither of us were in a position to do so. And I think that was probably the last time I actually heard from Icky until he became friends of mine on Facebook when I joined Facebook in June of this year. And then sadly on September the 5th of this year, he announced the fact that he had lung cancer with throat complications and abscess, and he said it wasn't looking good. But he said, never mind that. He said, I just want to remember the 13 good years in the army and all the good lads. So that was typical Icky to the end. Within about 2 weeks, he was dead. He passed. Diane notified me very kindly, and the word soon got out. And it is his funeral on Monday. Like I said, my apologies for not being there, but this is my little tribute to Icky. So, Icky died of lung cancer. Now, part of my training under Dr. Kiltz from New York has been to understand how some cancers are caused by defects of the mitochondria, and that can be attributed to poor nutrition. He worked very closely with Professor Thomas Seyfried of Boston College, who is kind of a lone voice in the treatment of cancer, or prevention of cancer and treatment of it through metabolic health methods. Through studies on mice and rats, he's discovered that basically the cancer can only feed on glucose, which is sugar, or glutamine, which is a product of, I believe, amino acids, which the body makes itself. However, if you cut the supply of glucose off at source by not eating glucose or any carbohydrates, then you can actually get your glucose ketone index, GKI, down to below 2. And Professor Seyfried has proved if you can keep your GKI below 2, Golf Kilo India below 2, you are killing tumour cells. So, as I said, it was far too late for me to get hold of Icky and to give him any suggestions. I'm hosting a Christmas party on November the 15th, and there's a guy called Andrew turning up who in 2013 was given months to live because he had a terminal brain tumour. He was studying the ketogenic diet himself at the time. He rejected any help from the NHS and went and treated himself via the ketogenic diet and denied the cancer glucose. And he's now 12 years later, having been given months to live, coming to the party which I'm hosting on November the 15th. And there are many other stories similar to Andrew's as well. So there is credence in what I'm saying, but you won't hear it from the NHS or any of the mainstream authorities. But if anybody's interested, I am now a trained health coach. Please reach out to me and just I will show you the research. I will tell you where to find the research, and you can make up your own minds. But if anybody is stricken, what have you got to lose at the end of the day? It's very, very sad, but such is life. Okay, so I think we're coming pretty much to the end of this today. Just looking at my notes, just in case I've forgotten anything. No, not really. Okay, so yeah, there we go. That's the story of me and Icky, of getting in some right escapades, the Grand National, etc., etc. I will be back with an update because Laney has now been accepted onto the elegant trial of a new study drug called elacestrant. This is not the time or the place to actually go into details about it, but I will be coming back probably next week to tell that story about how that came about and what she's finding. She is suffering some side effects, which we are expecting. She is taking a very large blue pill, looks like a horse pill, and it is causing some gastrointestinal problems and a bit of nausea, but that we were told to expect that. And we know from experience and from training that such things will pass with time. If they don't, then they have to be addressed, but hopefully things will pass with time. Okay, so that's quite a long one for me. It's another one-take wonder with all the ers and the ums and oohs still left in. But anyway, such is life. I will learn how to edit videos, but then again, it's far more fun with all the ers and me making myself look an idiot. Anyway, so it's time for this idiot to say good night. It is Saturday night. I don't go out anymore. Haven't had a drink for 6 months. but I'll say good night. Good night, all.